History of architecture is tightly connected to the construction history. The genuine necessity of human beings to generate new architectures to protect their activities from the elements has always been tightly connected to their capacity in selecting materials, on learning the best ways to assemble them, and generating structural components strong enough as not to fail under current or exceptional circumstances. In Antiquity, two of the most significant innovations in the construction history of the Mediterranean occurred with the introduction of fire bricks and vaulted construction. Fire brick vaulting was massively employed by the Romans and the Byzantines. But when was fire brick vaulting introduced into the Mediterranean region? When the technical language of brick vaulting evolved in the West? In recent years, I had the opportunity to highlight some early examples of brick vaulting and particularly how solid brick vaulting was progressively introduced in Roman construction. Solid brick vaulting, that is to say vaults entirely built with bricks, can be divided into main categories: dry brick vaulting and mortar brick vaulting. To the first category belongs the eldest example that I have so far discovered. It is a tomb located in Cyprus, close to Salamis, in the late Bronze Age city of Angomi. It was erroneously considered to be built according to the Mycenaean building technique of cantilevered vaults, the so-called false vaults. However, here 5 bricks are clearly placed radially. No mortar was used. The equilibrium was achieved by forming rings of bricks which were stable because of their trapezoidal shape, which granted continuity between the bricks of each course. This example is enough sophisticated as to show skills, starting from the production of ad hoc bricks, which must have been developed through extensive practice. Unfortunately, to find other evidence of dry brick vaulting, we need to examine much later examples. A most interesting evidence is offered by a Hellenistic furnace in Morgantina, Sicily. Here, barrel vaults and arches were made with bricks prepared on purpose with chamotte to result fire resistant. Voussoir bricks, that is to say bricks with a wedged form, made it unnecessary to use mortar. This technique is still in use today for the construction of furnaces. Fire brick makers told me that mortar may be compromised by the high temperatures developed in the furnace, hence the use of dry masonry for the arches. This is exemplified by some dry arches built by Luigi Bernasconi, close to the furnace where he still produces handmade fire bricks. One of the questions regarding the way fire bricks vaulting developed in Italy during the Roman times is when and how this occurred. Fundamental evidence is given by the northern regions of Italy, where fire brick was used in construction at least since the end of the 3rd century BC. Fire brick dry vaulting is documented in the necropolises of Norcia, central Italy. Voussoir bricks were used with the same purpose as in Morgantina. In a region with no clay, bricks must have been imported on purpose for the construction. The evidence creates a link between South Italy and Northern Italy and documents a widespread use of brick vaulting since the 2nd century BC. Mortar brick vaulting techniques found in Greece the most fertile ground for generating a new repertoire. Brick vaulting in Greece was an excellent compromise for Roman architects, challenged by the construction of buildings according to the models that had been developed in central Italy. Patras, in the Peloponnese, is where we have evidence for the early attempts in brick construction. Brick vaulting offered an excellent solution to the lack of materials and building quality as the one in central Italy, where hydraulic mortars were possible because of the use of volcanic aggregates, as the well-known pozzolana. In the Peloponnese, instead of having concrete set directly on a timber centering, a mixed technique was employed. Brick vaults were first laid on the centering, and then mortar rubble was set above it. Mortar bricks form vaults with minimal quantity of mortar in the joints, allowing for the centering to be quickly removed after placing the key brick. Brick vaults were thus used as a permanent centering for the construction. A major novelty in brick vaulted construction was the adoption of a building technique frequently mentioned as pitched brick construction, where bricks are placed on their edge, vertical or inclined, to form parallel rings. This building technique was important from Parthia, where it was documented in the 1st century AD. It allowed for a small span vaults to be built without using a temporary support or centering. The first and most monumental example of vertical vaulting is the Great Hall at Argos in the Peloponnese. This building had a freestanding pitch brick vaulting which spanned 11 meters. Differently from any other Roman vault, this brick vault was not covered with mortar rubble. In fact, on the extractors of the vault, shear walls supported a concrete roof slab. The cavities between the vault and the roof are still visible in the remains. Following this vault, many other vaults were built with the bricks set on edge. A new technical language developed for the construction of vaults of different forms, which eventually was assimilated by the Byzantine builders. Another fundamental revolution in brick vaulting occurred with gypsum mortar replaced lime mortar as bonding agent. In a study I conducted on the Almoravid Kuba in Marrakesh, Morocco, I suggest that the 12th century was the period when brick vaulting with gypsum mortar was imported from Persia. The new building technique allowed the construction of thin walls that could be built without centering. This kind of vaulting is known as tile vault construction or Catalan vaults. They became famous in the medieval times in Valencia. It is said that in the late 14th century, Pere el Cerimoniós urged his masters of works in Saragossa to go to Valencia and learn about these vaults made out of tiles and gypsum, which are described as very advantageous for being very fast and low cost. Lightness and rapidity in execution of these vaults was a true step beyond the achievements of Roman builders. When Count d'Espí included the Spanish building technique in his treatise, published in 1754, tile vaults suddenly became familiar to many regions of Europe. While in Spain, we still have masters as Salvador Gomis able to employ this technique, in Italy it's more than 50 years that reinforced concrete has forced this technique to be abandoned.